Welcome to the Artful Mystic X. I am Carone, and today I am going to be talking about The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. It came out in the early 2000s, and it was a bestseller. Kudos to Dawkins for that. We will agree to disagree, he and I, but I give honor to the fact that it was a bestseller. Did not, however, reach the Bible. The Bible is the #1 bestseller, and I didn't even know how many copies the Bible has sold. 5 to 7 billion. Like, what? So I'm thinking to myself, why has the Bible been thrown out of education? Not for a religious text, but for a literature, just for a text of literature, because there's so many great stories in it, and the poetry part in the Psalms and the Proverbs, I think those are beautiful too, but who am I? I just know that the Bible is the #1 best-selling book, and it's still being printed in thousands of different languages, and so that's fascinating to me as well. And Dawkins throws a lot of shade on the Bible, so I just want to give a heads up and a shout out for the Bible. But okay, so Dawkins, if you don't know, he was born in Kenya, and his parents were English. His father wished that he had been more of a naturalist as a child. Of course, being in Kenya, I can only imagine the beautiful scenery he had to look at. But he said as a child, he was not interested in observing the birds or the insects or pressing flowers. So it's almost as if he looked down on those things, which is interesting because fast forward to Darwin, who is the ultimate observer that he adores. Anyway, I just thought that was a funny thought. So I, on the other hand, as a child, was constantly observing nature. My mom's home was on the garden tour many times, and she, as my sister pointed out to me, created almost this orchestra, this symphony of flora and fauna. Throughout the year, different things would bloom, and it was really spectacular. And so I had the benefit of a child being able to be in this fabulous 3D artwork experience with floral and fauna and observe it. And I would observe, is there anything the same? I couldn't come across like the same leaf with the same shape, the exact same shape, the exact same veins, the hue. It was always different. And so I knew early on as a child, just from looking at that, as somebody who created, I won my first art contest at 7, that there is a creator for me. Just being visual, I saw that, and I gave honor to that. I didn't even need the Bible for in my brain to see that there was some sort of magnus opus artist in the unseen realm. But I was able to see the creation, and it, for me, was a wonderful thing. So Dawkins didn't obviously have that same experience. They move back to England. He, for the first time, his parents, they're moving back to England, and they are part of the Anglican Church, which Dawkins refers to as the civilized church religion. And his father becomes a landholder. In England, you have a lot of estates and castles and whatnot, and they're often passed down. And so evidently his dad came into this landholding, which clearly would create a lot of work to oversee. And his parents sent him to a boarding school at 8, which to me was quite shocking. I'm a mom, and I just thought, wow, that's a very young age to send someone to boarding school. And, it's an elite thing that happens in England. A lot of people there go to boarding schools. But, I just thought that had to have created a type of trauma. Even if it's a normal thing, it had to have been jarring on some levels. And I don't know if he's written about it or talked about it. I'll have to research that a bit more. But now you're thrown into a bunch of kids that are your age, all boys. I'm assuming it was an all boys school. And you're with probably all male teachers, so there's lots of testosterone going on. It's too bad that he didn't have more of female influence. I think he had a sister, obviously he had a mom. I don't know if he was going, back home on the weekends, or if it was just one of those schools where you went to, until you had your breaks or holidays. But the Bible refers to wisdom as a woman, and so he's not having the female perspective and wisdom added into this pot of all this male ness that's going on. So I find that psychologically very interesting with Dawkins and how that might have sort of influenced him. I also learned from one of my other brothers that there are people in the Anglican Church, and this was new for me, that they believe in Christian morals, and why Dawkins himself has been calling himself a cultural Christian. So they can believe in Christian morals, but they don't believe in Jesus as a divine son of God, and they don't even have to believe in God. So I found that really fascinating. So I was also wondering if that's perhaps how he was raised or taught by the professors or teachers at his boarding school. Perhaps they were thinking along those lines, and that was some of his influences as well, because even though he's baptized at 12, at 15, he found Darwin. And it's kind of like someone who finds God. He found Darwin at 15, and he said that was it for him. Like that's all he needed. In fact, he said the complexity of life leads to a designer God, but Darwin was a far superior explanation than God, pulling the rug from under God. Okay, now, to me, you hear people saying if you believe in God, it's like a crutch. No, to me, it's like if I believe in God, I'm honoring, like I honor other artists. When I go to other art shows, I'm honoring the work and the mental fortitude they've put into their exhibit. There's a great story about Michelangelo when he did the Pieta, that amazing marble sculpture he did in his 20s of Mary holding Jesus as he, after he's died. Okay, whatever. It's an exquisite sculpture, and he moved it into a public courtyard at night, and then people were coming to see it during the day, and he would go linger and listen and see what they were saying about it, and they were attributing it to a different artist. And of course, Michelangelo blew up, right? And so he went back and he hammered into Mary's sash. Michelangelo did this. And, people, they want honor and respect for what they do. I'm sure Dawkins, as much as he loves his fellow atheists, if they took the God Delusion and put their name on it, you might see the horns come out on Dawkins. All right. So, but I just find this is interesting that he agrees that there's complexity of life, that it does seem to show there's some type of a designer. Yet Darwin comes in to save him from believing in God, and he's putting his faith in man rather than a divine magnus opus brain. Because I believe that God wasn't created. I believe God, because I also believe in eternity. And what that eternity is interesting for me, because as a child, I lay on my bed at night constantly thinking about what is eternity? What does that mean? How does that happen? How can that occur? I spent nights just laying in my bed contemplating eternity. But God says, I am that I am. So this to me is an eternal God. There's eternity, and it doesn't start now. Eternity has been forever. It's been eternal. So this is an eternal being that decided at some point to create this earth and the planets around and the heavens, and knows all the stars by name. And there's, more than trillions of stars. So that's like a lot of names. Yet Dawkins wants to put his faith in Darwin. Now, to me, again, science changes. So, how are you putting your faith so much in Darwin? I mean, I get how you can, run with certain parts of evolution, but there's certain parts, as Dawkins admits to, that are like the gene. The gene has information in it, and what is the origin of the genes? Like the origin of the gene. We know the gene replicates and then procreates, and so evolution is the gradual process of that. But the gene's origin, that's still an issue. Okay, so since 15, Dawkins has been a Darwin follower, a Darwin disciple, a hardcore Darwin lover, and maybe also a father figure, I would imagine. If his dad isn't really much in his life, I could really see how Darwin could be, also a father figure to Dawkins. And okay, we're all on our own journey here. And I find it interesting. So he opens the God Delusion with Douglas Adams, who he was obviously friends with and an admirer of. He refers to him, Adams refers to himself as a radical atheist. I mean, he didn't want anything to do with even being agnostic. He wanted nothing to do with even being atheist. He wanted to be a radical atheist. So I find that really interesting. And he was an English author and humorist, a screenwriter for The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which came from his BBC radio comedy. And that film was a comedy sci-fi. I have not seen it. Maybe some of you have, and you can say in the comments below if I should watch it or not. I'm not a big sci-fi person, but it sounds interesting from what I read up on it. So Adams once said, and Dawkins has put his quote in here from Adams, "Isn't it enough to see that a garden is beautiful without having to believe that there are fairies at the bottom of it too?" So, well, as I've shared with you, I loved being in my mother's garden, and I love thinking about fairies. I love the imagination. I still do. I mean, as a child, who doesn't want to think about those fairies? But then there's lots of different ways of thinking, right? And clearly, Dawkins and Adams, as children, perhaps maybe weren't thinking about those fairies. Although clearly Adams, as he aged, was very much in his imagination. But I think the other reason why Dawkins put this quote in the God Delusion is because from his point of view, why can't we just look at the earth and not think about God, like the God fairy, right? Why can't we just see the earth as it is and not have to think about God at all? Why can't it just be the earth? And of course, I take issue with that. Being a creative person, I won my first art contest at 7, and I want to honor the creator as the designer and as also the one who enabled me to create, because I clearly could have been someone who's not an artist. Okay, we're all designed to do things slightly different. My siblings, I have 4 other siblings, and we're all very different. And any of you who come from big families or blended families will see that you're all different. And there's no one that is the same, thank God, right? That we can agree to disagree, that we can think differently. I love that part of life. But staying in the vein of the child, Dawkins writes about the consciousness and about having that raised. And so he says here on page 18, "We all need our consciousness raised, atheists as well as theists. Unconsciously observe society's convention that we must be especially polite and respectful to faith." Really? I don't know. Seems to be a lot of shade on faith, but okay. "And I never tire of drawing attention to society's tacit acceptance of the labeling of small children with the religious opinions of their parents." Okay, uh, atheists need to raise their own consciousness of the anomaly. Religious opinion is the one kind of parental opinion that, by almost all universal consent, can be fastened upon children who are, in truth, too young to know what their opinion really is. There is no such thing as a Christian child. Only a child of Christian parents sees every opportunity to ram it home. What? Wow, that seemed a little toxic there, Dawkins. You seem a little aggressive. Every opportunity to ram it home. Okay, well, clearly he has issues with Christianity, Christian parents, and children being called Christians. He would like all children to be more skeptics. I guess he'd like it if, America was communist or, an atheist. Let's look at atheism now, Dawkins. Would you really want everyone to be atheists? Because if we look at the history of atheism with Pol Pot and Stalin and Mao, those were some horrific indoctrinations going on. Even look at Hitler. He was causing children to turn in their own parents. So we have Christianity that you're looking at is and you have such an anathema to, but we have to also look at atheism and what it's produced as well. Oh no, I'm going too long, so I will do another video.